We're going to be talking today about something that at some point everybody struggles with, and that's weight loss. Whether it's after the birth of a child, or you start college and put on that freshman 15, or start a new job, move to a new city and have packed on the pounds and out of your healthy routine, sometimes it can be hard for people to get back on track. And yo-yo dieting is definitely frustrating. Nobody wants that. But today, Dr. Todd Cevene is going to talk to me and you about the system that he has had success with teaching to over 75,000 people, not just to transform their relationship with food and create healthy habits, but how to create sustainable and healthy weight loss that also balances hormones and get people not just feeling better, but looking better. Dr. Cevene, or if I may call you Todd, welcome
Yeah,
to the podcast.
absolutely. Thank
Fantastic.
you. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So tell people a little bit about your background, how you got into this.
I got in this. My main background is pain management. So I've got a pain management clinic outside of Chicago where we do. It's easier to tell you what we don't do, but the focus is primarily pain management. We've had a lot of patients through the years that had the need for weight loss, but it was primarily because they couldn't do particular injections, like an epidural per se, or different medications needed that were contraindicated either with blood pressure issues, diabetic issues, blood sugar issues, and a lot of them need to lose weight. And there's a lot of things out there to lose weight, and frankly, they all work. But the problem was keeping it off for patients and making sure they stayed healthy. And it had to be something that didn't feel like a diet. And so that really kind of spawned us to move forward with what we did. And we started with some medications that probably all doctors utilize that are just FDA approved. And we didn't want to have something that was just medication prescribed. And it's not, again, that medication's bad. It's just the medications are stimulants and they don't work for a lot of patients, and you can't be on them for more than 90 days according to the FDA standards. So we needed something that was a natural approach that would help regulate those hormones and curb appetite and that psychological factor of not feeling like you're dieting.
And one of the medications, the newer category medications of those GLP-1 agonists, Wegovy, semaglutide, that's not a
Yeah.
stimulant, that stimulant category. But are you finding the same challenge where people will can take the weight off short term, but it's not really teaching them how to eat and how to live to promote their health long term and to keep it off for the rest of their life?
Yeah, I don't think people realize or patients realize that those are designed or meant to be taken by the drug manufacturers until you're dead. And there's not a lot of patients that come into clinics saying, "What medication can you give me that I can take forever?" And the patients that we see, it's maybe 15, 20% of patients come in that have either used those and not had success, or they've stopped because the side effects are so bad, or they're still using them, but now they've heard they're going to be illegal here in the end of May to compound. So unless you've got $1,200 a month, it'll be challenging for a lot of people. But they just reduce your calorie intake by not eating. That doesn't really correct anything in the body.
So correcting things in the body is, I'm sure, a multifaceted approach. You mentioned at the beginning some of the barriers to people losing weight and getting healthier, mainly pain is what you talked about. And that obviously, decreased mobility,
Yeah.
you can't move around, you can't exercise. There are lots of reasons why people don't, have a hard time losing weight. How do you triage that? How do you
Yeah.
evaluate that to get somebody on the right approach?
That's a big issue because we would see people, there's kind of categorically, it seems to fall into two categories: either people that exercise, that simply like to exercise, and they're going to do it forever, or people that know they should and they like to, but maybe they just don't get to it, or time's a constraint, or kids, or a variety of other things. And what's that expression? The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so they have good intentions, and again, everybody knows they should read more, eat healthier, and exercise, but doing it's a very different task. So, and there's a lot of patients that have knee issues, hip issues, back issues, where it's not an option for them, or they're just tired, or it's just that doesn't fall in that category. So, what we did is develop something that helped control blood sugars and influence insulin, and by influencing insulin, it stops hunger. And so, when you can reduce hunger by controlling those, or influencing those metabolic hormones, your body has a tendency then to burn more fat as an energy source rather than sugar, is what's happening. And you lose inches very quickly. It's quite astonishing with what happens.
So what is that you developed?
We call it a lipotropic drop. And what it is, again, is it's a drop that goes under the tongue. You hold it under your tongue for 30 seconds. It's not meant to be taken or needed to be taken forever. You take it just while you're reducing your weight until you hit your proper BMI or whatever weight or body fat or size you'd like to be. And that's, frankly, that's different for everybody. And there's not really a weight that you have to weigh. It's where you feel good, right? So we want you healthy, but it's designed to, again, affect those metabolic hormones so they're balanced better and weight is lost.
And what is that drop? I mean, what's in it?
Oh, I apologize. It's an amino acid compound. So amino acid compounds are incomplete proteins that are similar to what peptides would be. And when you take particular doses of particular amino acids and change the dose and how you titrate it, it has different effects on the body, like a medication would, but it's natural.
And when you use that, is this a long term? You talk about the drugs and somebody taking the drugs forever. Is that a similar thing? Someone's going to be taking this drop forever?
No, it's a great question. So, technically, or in fairness, really, there's nothing you could take. There's nothing I'm aware of on the planet where you take it, you look fantastic, and then you just kind of clap your hands and go, "Cool, now I'm done. Where's the beer and pizza?" And you're going to look great forever. So, the most honest or truthful way to permanent weight loss with a guarantee is going to be whatever you choose to get you where you want to be. You've got to do that 70 or 80% of the time until you're dead, because that's what got you where you want to be and where you're healthy, right? Or you look great, feel great. So if you can take the food that is a healthier food and it's a non-inflammatory food that people lose weight with, combined with the drops that we've created to help control those metabolic hormones, people are, since they have to eat, right? They're always going to eat. They're always going to be who they are. They're not going to change who they are. It's important that it doesn't feel like a program. So if you can get somebody to lose weight without having to exercise, they're dropping inches and they're eating food they like, and they've got the latitude to have bread or alcohol if they choose socially or go out on date night and vacations. And you can show them how to drop that weight again after they make a mistake. And again, everybody's going to make them. That's life. You really can keep weight off forever because you're now empowered and you understand what to do.
So you talk about diet and diets people follow, and they need to do certain activities 70 80% of the time to get the long-term benefits, as you mentioned, inflammatory or the opposite, anti-inflammatory foods.
Sure.
What are some dietary patterns then that you recommend, or how do you work with people to help them transition to eating a healthier diet?
Yeah, that was a task that took a little bit of time to figure out. So what we do is with our particular program, we've got coaches that you can meet either by video or phone, virtually or in person, depending on where you are. We measure you and get your metrics, your weight, your body fat, and your inches. But then again, that can be done at home. It's just a scale and measuring tape. So when we're speaking to people and they're tracking what they're eating, when you're getting the metrics on what they're eating and you're tracking how much inches they're losing and how much weight they're losing, when they're logging their foods, you can create references with them on how bad they can be and still lose weight, or where that tipping point is, if that makes sense. On here's how much you can do and still lose weight, and here's how much you can do and now you've done too much and you're not losing weight. And that's really true of any food. It's whether it's pie or bread or alcohol or regardless of what that is. So the key is allowing people enough freedom to make sure they're losing weight, but to create those distinctions as they're eating and logging what they're eating, so they're aware of how much is too much and how much is okay.
So when you say somebody is there a similar calculation or percentage, like you mentioned earlier, 70 to 80% of the time you need to do, X or Y or Z to get the benefits? Is it similar that there are certain foods, while people can enjoy them, sounds like in moderation or with limits, that 70 to 80% of the time, though, there are dietary patterns and foods that people should be eating in order to maximize their metabolic health and lose weight and feel better?
Yeah, it's exactly right. So sometimes it comes off the premise, sometimes good is just good enough, right? You don't have to have perfection. I just need good. So if you're losing weight, you're losing inches, and we're tracking what you're doing, we want to create those distinctions. So there's always a tipping point where somebody has too much of something and their body doesn't respond well to it. Like dairy is a good example. So it's not that you shouldn't or can't eat dairy, but dairy for a lot of people's could be rather inflammatory. And if you've got a lot of inflammation in your body, that can slow weight loss. Or constipation, for example, will slow weight loss or stop weight loss. Even with the right foods, it will still stop weight loss. So you've got to stay in touch with people or coaching sessions to make sure you're correcting those as they're eating whatever it is they may be eating. But
and so what are some that you've talked a lot about the food they should be minimizing? What are foods though that people should be eating freely without any concern about negative effects?
We typically would want people eating leaner protein. So it's not a keto diet. We stay away from keto. And again, it's not that keto is bad. It's just from all the patients I've seen for the last 25 years, it doesn't seem to be very sustainable for the vast majority of people. So it's lean proteins, and that could be anything that walks, flies, or swims. That's steak, beef, chicken, burgers, right? Deli meat, eggs, whatever that may be. So we want leaner proteins. We stay away from fats, even healthy fats like olive oil, almonds, nuts, avocado. And they're healthy, but if we're trying to pump fat out of you, we don't typically want you ingesting or eating a lot more fat on purpose. We want the fat to come off of your body. So it's, again, opposite of what a keto diet may be. We do a lot of vegetables we want people eating. They can have any vegetables they like, but we try to stay away from peas, corn, or carrots. And we find that they typically will have an insulin response, and it seems to slow the metabolic rate for people. Believe it or not, there's breads you can eat and alcohol you can have if you choose socially and still lose weight. We use fruit a lot as well. So fruits, but we stay away from bananas, grapes, and pineapple because they typically will have an insulin response, and we notice that it slows weight loss quite a bit.
And is any of this really affect the gut microbiome, or how does that play into it, if at all?
Yeah, the gut microbiome definitely will be affected. So if patients are constipated, again, that could be affected from the gut biome or could affect the gut biome, but it's a great question. People don't think of that. So the gut biome pretty much rules our body, right? And controls everything. We find if someone's constipated and they don't have a healthy gut biome, say in that example, as fat breaks down, since fat holds a lot of toxins, those toxins will then have a tendency to raise liver enzymes a little bit. Not enough, again, that you need labs or there's any danger, but as those liver enzymes go up, the body has a tendency to turn off or turn down fat metabolism or that metabolic process until bowel movements resume in a normal fashion and everything kind of gets flowing again. So we focus on the gut biome, but most of the foods we're eating are an anti-inflammatory diet. So usually the gut biome or leaky gut or those types of things comes into play when people have leaky gut syndrome from just a really unhealthy diet or improper foods that affect them.
Yeah. And is your suggestion, I was curious, it struck me about your suggestion to have people avoid fats, even, olive oil, which we know is healthy, has a lot of health benefits to it. How long do you recommend people do that for?
So we only avoid fat primarily if a person has a fair or significant amount of body fat on them. The premise is that you've got enough fat to sustain you coming down, and there's enough fat in your diet, even eating healthy, where there's enough fat coming in. And I think oftentimes, from my experience, people don't realize how much is enough and how much do you really need. They were just taught that fat's okay as long as it's a good fat, but that doesn't mean that you want to eat a pound of nuts or a cup of olive oil a day. It's too much fat. So we typically will ask them to cut back on fats as much as possible until they're the size they want to be or they're a healthy BMI. And then we start to resume and bring those fats back in. And you can use olive oil, for example, but the distinction we would have would be use it maybe in an aerosol spray and spray in that capacity instead of free pouring oil into a pan or over food, because the fats, I think, if memory serves me, about 15 or 16 grams in a serving, which is about a tablespoon, 2 tablespoons.
Well, in terms of fat, I'm curious, do you think at all about the omega-3 versus omega fat fatty acid ratios? Because you talk about inflammation and inflammatory diet. The fats from animals like beef are primarily those omega-6 pro-inflammatory.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that fats do is incorporate it, as you know, incorporate into the cell membrane. So I'm curious with respect to fats and those ratios. Is that something that you think about? Is that something that's part of this program, or you're just more concerned with them reducing their total fat intake?
No, it's just more or less their total fat intake. We can go into those types of details if patients want them, but it's rare they ask those types of details. So, as a rule of thumb, the eating we have is intentionally kept very loose. So, I don't want to say we don't care, but I don't care if you're eating tree bark and chasing it with wine and bourbon. If you're losing fat, you're happy, you're sleeping better, and your life's improving, you're dropping inches in visceral fat. That's really what we want. So we want to find some, foods that you're eating that you can maintain, you like, and can eat long term that are sustainable. And we can certainly focus more on health, but exercise, for example, everybody knows they should exercise, but if your heart rate goes too high, that spikes insulin factor and it slows weight loss down. So you become more fit, but you won't become thin. And for patients wanting to lose weight, I'm not as concerned about how fast they run the mile. I want them losing fat and clothing sizes.
And so are you counseling them on exercise as well and getting into that fat burning zone?
Yeah, if they'd like to exercise, they can. It's not required for the success we typically find. And a normal deliverable result is typically 10% of somebody's body weight. And about 2 months is a pretty low hanging fruit, or that's a deliverable result, or it's usually about two clothing sizes for most people. There's no calorie limitation. So if you're hungry, you need to eat. And if you're not hungry, don't eat. It's just, again, we're not eating to eat, only if you're hungry. But when you're controlling insulin, you find hunger is not a very big factor.
Yeah. And what do you find when people come to you and they're looking for some assistance at the things they've tried before? And I think it's quite common, first of all, that people will try different diets or different approaches, and when they don't work, out of frustration, they may give up for a while, but sometimes they go back and start looking for other things. What are some of the areas that you find that people have been most challenged with that you try and
Yeah.
address?
I think it's creating different distinctions for people. So a few common things we hear is, women, for example, around menopause or perimenopausal age will say, what I used to do when I was 30 or my early 40s always worked. And all of a sudden now I'm doing it and it's not working. And as those hormones change, then your body stores fat faster. So it has a tendency to, just to change, and you have to know how to adapt to that. So we address people that have cravings a lot, or they say they crave sweets, and most people probably love a good cookie or Danish or muffin or something like that, and it's helping them realize that those are hormonal issues that are created, say primarily by ghrelin. So if you can control insulin and ghrelin, and those hormones aren't spiking or present in the bloodstream, you remove a lot of people's cravings. So if you don't have really food cravings and you're not that hungry, it's really easy to make good choices because you're not dealing with something requiring some type of willpower, right? It's a really key element. So I don't want to say there's no such thing as willpower, but what we find just over and over and over and over again with 75,000 plus people going through this is willpower is, almost non-existent. So when those hormones hit your system, sooner or later, you're probably going to buckle and give in some capacity. It's like telling a woman having hot flashes, use willpower and stop having them. It's not very realistic.
Yeah. So again, just quickly with that scenario, that demographic, as more and more women are hitting that age now, what are some of the key suggestions to helping them navigate that challenge?
Yeah, it's probably regulating your sugar. Stay away from sugars would be one for sure. And if you can minimize sugars, you can do that just through regular eating habits and keeping sugars low, which will keep your insulin response lower. And you'll find that craving will go away in a couple of days. That'll go away. Helps people quite a bit. People often say they eat when they're bored. We hear that a lot too, that they eat when they're bored. And people don't realize nobody really eats when they're bored. You're hungry, but you're not hungry enough for a meal, or that biochemistry, like we talked about, or those hormones are off. So you're picking. Because you're hungry, you're just not hungry enough to create a meal. But you've never sat at home and had a friend call and they say, what are you doing? And you say, nothing, I'm just sitting around the house bored. And they say, great, let's go to a buffet. And you think, sure, and you'll go stuff yourself. So it's silly if you think about it, but that's a common thing people think is they eat when they're bored. It just,
Right.
again, the chemistry's off.
Right. Tell people, is there anything we've talked about a lot in hormone balancing? It's part of that with menopause and other times of ages in people's lives. Cortisol is a big issue that people struggle with.
It is, yeah.
And that as will keep the pounds on. How do you work with people in terms of metabolic health and cortisol?
Yeah, so cortisol can definitely affect insulin, which then affects weight, and that can store and create towards an insulin resistance and store belly fat. So cortisol is secreted when you're sleeping in restful sleep at night. So if you're not getting restful sleep at night, then your cortisol levels start to drop, or if you're really stressed out, cortisol levels plummet. There's a product called Cortisol Manager you can get from most physicians would carry or have or be aware of that will help manage it so it stays at a balanced level. You take it at night before bed. Now, it's not going to make you lose weight, but it certainly helps with stress and with sleep. And so if people are getting the right amount of sleep, or restful sleep is better to say than right amount, then
Right.
those don't seem to be much of an issue. But restful sleep is definitely a key.
So you're not just looking at diet then, you understand, of course, that other things like sleep, stress management, all play a role here. And when you're
Oh,
walking,
absolutely.
yeah, and you're working with people, you touch on all of those parts of that holistic approach to sustainable weight loss.
Yeah, you have to look at all of them. And there's, some people, those aren't as big of an issue and they'll lose weight really fast and they'll lose fat really fast and they'll maintain muscle. And other people, it doesn't go quite as quickly. And you've got to look at those secondary type issues like you're bringing to the table right now and resolve them and fix them for them or come up with a solution for them. And if you can't resolve it, it's not that you can't get to where you want to be. It perhaps just goes at a slower pace.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
How can people learn more about your work and find out more information?
if you go to our website, Secret for Weight Loss is as a great starting point, and they can call for a consultation and speak to one of the doctors that are there, or speak to one of the coaches, or anybody that can do a consult for them at no charge and just provide information and or more information to them, or do again a consult on their personal history as to what's happening, what's possible, how much weight could be lost, and about how fast, and what a reasonable expectation is. But the key is it can't be hard. It has to be easy.
Right. And if there's any parting words you'd like to leave, any sort of thoughts or concepts we didn't touch on that you think are important for people to know, what would you leave them with?
I think it's really important. We hear patients say a lot, nothing works, nothing works. And it's really important to start to wrap your head around the fact that nothing you've tried so far has worked. But you should never say nothing works. What that means is just you haven't found the correct approach.
I love that.
So yeah, don't give up, man. There's a way. You just haven't found it or you haven't found a doctor to give it to you yet.
I love that.
So there's always a way.
We'll link to your website in the show notes down there so people can check that out and hopefully finally get on the road to their metabolic health and sustainable weight loss that I know a lot of people are struggling with. So thank you for sharing your approach. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Dr. John. I appreciate it.